At 0900 hours on February 19, Corporal Tony Stein crouched in a shallow depression on Iwo Jima's black volcanic beach, gripping a weapon that officially didn't exist. The Marines called it the Stinger. The Japanese defenders would soon know it only by its devastating mathematics, 1,200 rounds per minute. Anthony Michael Stein was born September 30. In Dayton, Ohio, to Steve and Rose Stein, Jewish immigrants who had fled Austria-Hungary to escape anti-Semitism. Tony never finished Kaiser High School. At Patterson Field, and later at Delco Products, he learned the language of lathes and precision tools, becoming a skilled tool and die maker. His hands understood what textbooks never could teach: how things fit together, how they could be improved, how problems were simply engineering challenges awaiting solutions. On September 22, Tony walked into a Marine Corps recruiting station and volunteered. He knew the Marines went in first, hit the hardest beaches, took the heaviest casualties. That was exactly what he wanted. After becoming a paramarine, he fought on Bougainville, where he killed 5 Japanese snipers in a single day. But his superiors noticed something else when equipment failed. Stein fixed it. When standard gear couldn't do the job, he modified it. In November 1944, after the paramarines were disbanded, Stein was reassigned to Company A, Unost Battalion, 28th Marines, 5th Marine Division, at Camp Tarawa in Hawaii. There he met Sergeant Mel Grevich, who had salvaged an ANM-2 aircraft machine gun from a crashed Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber. The ANM-2 weighed just 21 pounds, 10 pounds lighter than the standard M1919, and fired 1,200 to 1,500 rounds per minute, 3 times faster than any infantry weapon. The problem was fundamental. The ANM-2 had spade grips designed for aircraft mounts. No stock. No sights. No way for a Marine to carry and fire it while advancing. It was built to be cooled by 300-mile-per-hour slipstreams, not carried through jungle or across beaches. Working nights in a maintenance shed with Private First Class John Little, they began the transformation. Stein cut down an M1 Garand buttstock, hollowing it with precision to accept the gun's buffer tube. He fabricated a solenoid trigger mechanism from sheet metal. Grevich welded a Browning automatic rifle bipod to the front. They added bar sights and adapted a carry handle from the ANM-2's spade grip assembly. The result, just over 40 inches long, weighing 23 to 25 pounds, capable of firing 30-06 rounds at devastating speed. They built 6 Stingers total, each given a woman's name. Grevich's was christened Betty Ann. 1 went to each of Company G's 3 rifle platoons, 1 to the demolition section, 1 to Grevich, and the last to Corporal Tony Stein of Company A. Reactions were mixed. Some called it brilliant. Others predicted it would jam on the first burst or melt after 2 magazines. But when Stein test-fired it, emptying a 100-round box into a target at 200 yards in under 6 seconds, the skeptics went quiet. The island they sailed toward was 8 square miles, dominated by Mount Suribachi, a 550-foot volcano. Intelligence said it would fall in a week. Intelligence was catastrophically wrong. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had spent months turning Iwo Jima into a fortress, 11 miles of tunnels, hundreds of pillboxes, 21,000 defenders ordered to make Americans pay in blood for every yard. When the first wave hit the beaches at 0900 0-0. Marines struggled through volcanic sand that swallowed their boots. The pre-invasion bombardment had done nothing. The Japanese had simply waited in their tunnels. Now they emerged to methodical slaughter. Machine gun fire from hidden pillboxes cut through advancing Marines. Mortar rounds walked across the beach with practiced precision. By mid-morning, the 5th Marine Division had lost 43 men killed, at approximately 0930 hours. Tony Stein made a decision others would call either insane bravery or calculated genius. He stood up. In the middle of a beach, where Japanese gunners had overlapping fields of fire, where every other Marine sought cover, Corporal Stein rose to full height and exposed himself to draw enemy fire and identify their positions. Bullets snapped past his head. He tracked the muzzle flashes. 75 yards northwest, a pillbox camouflaged with volcanic rock. He shouldered the stinger and squeezed the trigger. The weapon roared to life with a sound unlike anything else on the battlefield. 1,200 rounds per minute hammered the volcanic rock and sandbags. The Type 92 machine gun inside fell silent within seconds. Stein shifted aim 40 yards left. Another pillbox. Another burst. The Japanese gun stopped firing. Around Stein, Marines who had been pinned down began to move. Seeing enemy positions suppressed, riflemen advanced. Sergeants shouted orders. The assault moved forward because one man with an improvised weapon was providing covering fire. No standard infantry weapon could match. Stein charged the first pillbox. Inside, 3 Japanese soldiers lay dead, torn by the sustained burst. He moved to the second. Same result. But then the stinger went light in his hands. The ammunition box was empty. 100 rounds gone in less than 10 seconds of trigger time. He looked back toward the beach. 200 yards through volcanic ash. Under mortar fire, with snipers now targeting Marines moving between positions. He started running. The volcanic sand made every step difficult, sinking 3 inches with each stride. Halfway to the beach, at 0945 hours, he passed a wounded Marine private first class from 2nd Platoon. Shrapnel wound to the leg. Stein grabbed him, slung him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, and kept running. The Marine weighed 160 pounds. The Stinger 25. His combat pack, another 30. He was carrying over 215 pounds through volcanic ash while mortars bracketed the beach. He reached the supply point, handed the wounded man to a corpsman, grabbed 4 ammunition boxes, and ran back. The return trip took 3 minutes under sniper fire. When he reached Company A's position, his platoon sergeant pointed to a 3rd pillbox larger, reinforced concrete with a Type 96 covering the approach to the airfield. 2 previous assaults had failed. 4 Marines lay dead in front of it. Stein loaded fresh ammunition, advanced on the pillbox alone, and at 50 yards opened fire. The Type 96 opened up immediately, but Stein's rate of fire was so high the Japanese gunner couldn't adjust aim fast enough. Stein's rounds found the firing slit. The enemy gun went silent. He charged the final 20 yards and dropped a grenade through the opening, killing the 3-man crew inside. He started his second run to the beach. This time he found 2 wounded Marines. He couldn't carry both. He took the chest wound case first. The man had minutes at most, ran him to the corpsman at 1,015 hours, grabbed ammunition, and made a 3rd trip for the 2nd wounded man. By 10:30 hours, Stein had made 4 complete trips, each time carrying a wounded Marine, each time returning with ammunition. His platoon had advanced 200 yards inland. They had destroyed 7 enemy positions, Stein had personally killed at least 15 Japanese soldiers. But the Stinger was suffering. The barrel was discolored purple from heat. The solenoid trigger was sticking, sometimes firing 1 round, sometimes 5. He had to tap it with his palm to reset it. The wooden stock was starting to char, and his boots were disintegrating. The volcanic ash was abrasive, tearing the leather. Running was becoming painful, each step sending sharp pains through his arches. At 1,045 hours, Stein made a decision others thought insane. He unlaced his boots and kicked them off. Then he removed his helmet. 2.5 pounds combined with the boots meant 5 pounds less to carry. 5 pounds meant faster movement between the beach and his platoon. Every second counted. His 5th run barefoot took 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Without rigid boot soles, he could feel the terrain and adjust his stride. The ash was coarse and painful, tearing skin. But he had better traction. He grabbed another wounded Marine unconscious. Bleeding internally carried him to the corpsman, loaded ammunition, and ran back. By 1100 hours, Stein had made 6 trips. 6 wounded Marines saved. 600 rounds delivered. His platoon had advanced 300 yards and was approaching the first airfield. Other Marines watched in awe at the barefoot corporal making repeated runs under fire. Some thought he was crazy. Others thought he was the bravest man they'd ever seen. At 1,120 hours, on his 7th trip, a round snapped past his head. Close. Maybe 6 inches. A high-velocity rifle round from distance. Stein dropped flat instantly. A sniper. He couldn't see the position, but the angle suggested the ridgeline 200 yards east. Another round cracked overhead. Missing. The sniper hadn't acquired his exact location yet. Stein had maybe 10 seconds before the shooter adjusted. Instead of seeking cover, Stein rolled left, grabbed the Stinger, and came up running, not away from the sniper, but toward him. Running perpendicular to the sniper's line of sight made him harder to hit. And if he could close the distance, the Stinger's rate of fire would overwhelm a bolt-action rifle. 3 more shots. All misses. At Duzeli yards, he saw movement, a figure in a spider hole behind volcanic rock. Stein dropped to one knee and opened fire. The Stinger roared, sending a 100-round stream into the position. The volcanic rock shattered. The camouflage disintegrated. When the box ran empty, there was only silence. The sniper was dead. His Type 97 rifle beside him. When Stein reached his platoon at 1,300 hours, the situation had deteriorated. Company A was pinned by 8 pillboxes arranged in a semicircle, creating interlocking fields of fire. Any Marine who stood up was engaged by multiple positions. 12 casualties in 20 minutes. The company commander had called for tank support, but the Shermans were bogged down in ash. Artillery couldn't get clear lines of sight. Stein assessed the tactical situation. The 8 pillboxes formed an arc 100 yards ahead. Japanese soldiers moved through connecting trenches. He calculated that if he could suppress multiple positions simultaneously, riflemen could advance under that covering fire. But it required exposing himself again. At 1,315 hours, he stood up and opened fire on the leftmost pillbox. 5-second burst. 100 rounds. The position went silent. Stein shifted to the next pillbox. Another burst. Silence. He worked methodically across the arc, suppressing each position in sequence. Japanese soldiers in the trenches fired at him. Type 99 rifles. Type 96 machine guns. Rounds kicked up ash around his bare feet. One bullet struck the Stinger's barrel with a metallic clang. The round deflected. The barrel held. The weapon kept firing. Stein emptied his box and dropped flat to reload. While he reloaded, riflemen advanced 50 yards. When he stood and resumed firing, they advanced another 50. The coordination was instinctive when the Stinger fired. They moved. By 13:30 hours, Company A had broken through. 5 pillboxes destroyed. 3 abandoned. 17 Japanese soldiers confirmed killed. 3 Marines lost. The advance continued. The Stinger was critically damaged. Now, the barrel bent slightly from the bullet strike. The bipod had broken off. The stock was charred black and smoking, but it still fired. At 1,345 hours, a Japanese Type 96 machine gun scored a direct hit on the Stinger itself. The weapon was ripped from Stein's hands and thrown 6 feet backward. He dove for cover. The Stinger lay in no man's land. Japanese soldiers knew he was disarmed and were waiting. At 1,347 hours, Stein sprinted into open ground. The Japanese machine gun opened fire immediately. He ran in a zigzag pattern. 3 seconds to reach the Stinger. He grabbed it, rolled behind cover, and checked the weapon. The belt feed was jammed. The guide rails bent. Stein cleared the jam with his fingers, loaded fresh ammunition, and test fired. It worked. Though slower, maybe 1,000 rounds per minute instead of 1,200. He stood and emptied the entire box into the pillbox that had shot the Stinger from his hands. 100 rounds in 7 seconds. The position was obliterated. By 1,400 hours, Company A had advanced 400 yards. 23 enemy positions destroyed. Stein personally accounted for 12 of them. 9 wounded Marines saved. The Stinger still firing despite everything, but the weapon's condition was terminal. Barrel bent at 5 degrees. Rate of fire down to 900 rounds per minute. Solenoid trigger firing unpredictably. Stock crumbling. At 1,430 hours. A Type 99 rifle round struck the receiver directly, knocking the weapon from Stein's hands again. It landed in a shell crater. Stein was exposed. No cover. No weapon. Japanese soldiers were firing from a trench, throwing grenades. He ran for the Stinger. A grenade exploded 5 yards behind him. Shrapnel hit his left leg and lower back, painful but not incapacitating. He grabbed the Stinger, dove into the crater, and checked it. The receiver had a deep gouge. He cycled the action manually, stiff but functional. He loaded a belt and fired. The weapon worked barely. Rate of fire down to 600 rounds per minute with terrible grinding noise. But 600 rounds per minute still beat everything else. By 1,500 hours, Stein had made 8 trips total. Over 2,000 rounds fired. Blood soaked his left leg and back. His feet were destroyed, torn flesh. Volcanic ash ground into every wound. And the Stinger was at the end of its operational life, held together by determination. But Company A had reached the base of Mount Suribachi at 1,700 hours. They were ordered to establish a defensive perimeter and hold overnight. The assault on the mountain would begin the next morning. For the first time since 0900, Stein assessed his condition. Feet destroyed. Shrapnel in leg and back. Hands blistered. exhausted after 8 hours of continuous combat. He had run approximately 3 miles total, carrying wounded men and ammunition under constant fire. Barefoot. A corpsman worked on his feet, wincing at the damage. "You're crazy. You know that?" That night, Japanese infiltrators probed the perimeter. Stein grabbed the damaged Stinger. When an enemy soldier appeared 30 yards away, he fired a short burst. The weapon worked. The infiltrator died. The assault on Mount Suribachi began at 0800 on February 20th. Company A climbed the volcanic slopes where the Japanese had fortified every meter with pillboxes, bunkers, and caves. An armorer had worked on the Stinger overnight, replacing the belt feed mechanism. The barrel was still bent, no replacement available, but it would fire. At 0930 hours, Company A encountered a reinforced bunker complex halfway up the slope. 4 concrete bunkers, multiple machine guns, mortar crews. The advance stalled. Stein moved forward and opened fire. The damaged barrel affected accuracy, but volume of fire still mattered. He suppressed the position long enough for demolition teams to advance with satchel charges. The bunker was destroyed. At 1015 hours, a Japanese grenade landed 3 feet from Stein. He tried to move but couldn't get traction on the loose ash. The grenade detonated. Shrapnel hit his right arm, right leg, and torso. Multiple wounds. Heavy bleeding. A corpsman reached him. "You're done. Corporal. We're evacuating you." Stein refused. He wrapped the wounds himself and continued fighting for 2 more hours while bleeding through bandages. Every time a pillbox opened fire, Stein suppressed it. Every time Japanese soldiers appeared, he cut them down. By 1230 hours, blood loss had become critical. He was lightheaded, vision narrowing, hands shaking. The corpsman insisted. This time, Stein didn't argue. He handed the Stinger to another Marine, keep it shooting, and allowed corpsmen to carry him to the beach and onto a hospital ship. Doctors removed 17 pieces of shrapnel, treated blood loss and infection, cleaned and dressed his feet wounds. They told him his war was over. He would be sent to Hawaii or possibly stateside. He had done more than enough. But on February 25th, news reached the hospital ship. The 28th Marines were assaulting Hill 362A. The fighting was catastrophic. Company A had lost 30% of its strength. Stein's platoon sergeant was dead. His squad leader was dead. On February 26th, against medical orders, Corporal Tony Stein left the hospital ship. He climbed into a landing craft, told the crew he'd been cleared, and returned to Iwo Jima. He was AWOL, wounded, barely able to walk. Nobody stopped him. He walked 6 miles across the island, past destroyed positions and graves registration teams, collecting American dead. When he reached Company A on February 27th, the company had been reduced from 240 men to 63 exhausted survivors. The company commander should have sent him back. Instead, he put Stein on the line immediately. They needed every rifle. For 2 days, Stein fought without the Stinger, carrying an M1 Garand and grenades. The fighting was slower, more dangerous, but Stein remained effective. On March 1, Itenjobai Sishiwu, Company A organized a 19-man patrol to locate Japanese pillboxes harassing the regiment's advance. Corporal Tony Stein was designated assistant patrol leader. Mission: move forward 400 yards. Locate enemy positions. Return with intelligence. No assault. Just reconnaissance. At 0700, the patrol moved out through volcanic ridges and ravines, perfect ambush terrain. They moved slowly, 20 yards at a time, knowing Japanese defenders were watching. At 0745, they reached a ridgeline overlooking a small valley. They could see camouflaged positions ahead. Stein signaled to advance. He stepped forward. M1 Garand, ready? His bandaged feet ached with every step. The shrapnel wounds in his arm and leg hadn't healed. At 075, 2 hours, a single shot rang out. The bullet struck Tony Stein in the head. He dropped instantly, dead before his body hit the volcanic ash. The shot came from a concealed position 200 yards northeast. A corpsman reached him within seconds. There was nothing to do. The wound was instantly fatal. Corporal Tony Stein, age 23, died on Iwo Jima at 0752 on March 1st. Iten Jobai Sishawu. The patrol completed its mission, carrying Stein's body back with them. News spread quickly through the 28th Marines. The barefoot corporal who made 8 trips on February 19th. The Marine who refused evacuation when wounded. The toolmaker who built a weapon from aircraft parts and used it to destroy more enemy positions than anyone could count. On March 2nd, Stein was buried in the 5th Marine Division Cemetery. Plot 5. Row 6. Grave 1107. A wooden cross marked his grave. No mention of the stinger. No mention of the Medal of Honor that would bear his name. The battle continued for 24 more days. When Iwo Jima was declared secure on March 26th, nearly 7,000 Americans were dead. Over 20,000 wounded. Of 21,000 Japanese defenders, fewer than 1,200 survived. On May 17, Iten Jobai Sishawu, Lieutenant Colonel Chandler Johnson submitted a recommendation for Stein to receive the Medal of Honor, detailing his actions on February 19th. 8 trips under fire. Wounded Marines evacuated. Enemy positions destroyed. Barefoot runs through volcanic ash. The recommendation was endorsed by every officer in the chain of command, 15 endorsements total, the most of any Marine from Iwo Jima. On February 19, Iten Jobai Sishawu, exactly 1 year after Stein's heroic actions. His widow Joan received his Medal of Honor at the Ohio State House. She was 24 years old. Admiral Richard Penoyer placed the medal around her neck as she stood overwhelmed by pride and grief. Stein's mother Rose watched with tears streaming, mourning the son who had dropped out of high school to become a machinist and died a hero. The Medal of Honor citation reads in part, the first man of his unit to be on station after hitting the beach in the initial assault. Corporal Stein, armed with a personally improvised aircraft-type weapon, provided rapid covering fire as the remainder of his platoon attempted to move into position. When his comrades were stalled by a concentrated machine gun and mortar barrage, he gallantly stood upright and exposed himself to the enemy's view, thereby drawing the hostile fire to his own person and enabling him to observe the location of the furiously blazing hostile guns. Determined to neutralize the strategically placed weapons, he boldly charged the enemy pillboxes one by one and succeeded in killing 20 of the enemy during the furious single-handed assault. Undaunted, he removed his helmet and shoes to expedite his movements and ran back to the beach for additional ammunition, making a total of 8 trips under intense fire and carrying or assisting a wounded man back each time. Stein's remains stayed on Iwo Jima until December 1948, when they were returned to Dayton. His return provoked a bitter dispute. Joan had remarried by 1947, Both she and Rose Stein claimed the right to decide burial location. Rose wanted her son in a Jewish cemetery. Joan wanted Catholic ground. Military regulations sided with the spouse. On December 17, Tony Stein was buried with full military honors in Calvary Cemetery following services at Our Lady of the Rosary Church. Rose attended, watching her son laid to rest against her wishes, but never stopped being proud. In 1972, the Navy commissioned USS Stein, a Knox-class frigate, in his honor. The ship served 21 years before being decommissioned in 1993. The Marine Corps preserved his story in training materials at Paris Island, where instructors teach about improvisation and adaptation. Tony Stein's story is part of that curriculum. The toolmaker who built a weapon from salvaged parts. The Marine who ran barefoot to save his brothers. The corporal who refused to stop fighting. All 6 Stingers were presumably destroyed after the war. Victims of military preference for standardized equipment. None survived. But decades later, the Canadian Historical Arms Museum built a functional replica demonstrating what Stein and Grevich accomplished with basic tools and salvaged parts. Military historians debate whether the Stinger was tactically significant. 6 weapons across 1 regiment couldn't change a battle's outcome. But those 6 weapons made a real difference to the Marines who fought alongside them. The suppressive fire allowed advances that would have stalled. The psychological impact kept enemy heads down at critical moments. And for 9 wounded Marines, the Stinger meant the difference between life and death. What is not debatable is Tony Stein's courage. 8 trips under fire. 9 lives saved. Barefoot runs that destroyed his feet. Refusing evacuation when wounded. Going AWOL from a hospital ship to return to his unit. Leading a patrol that cost him his life. Admiral Chester Nimitz said of Iwo Jima that uncommon valor was a common virtue. 27 Marines from Iwo Jima received the Medal of Honor. More than any other single battle. But even among those heroes, Corporal Tony Stein stood out, the only recipient to earn his decoration with a field-modified aircraft gun. The only Marine who ran barefoot on 8 occasions carrying wounded men to safety. Combining mechanical genius with combat courage in dramatic, visible, and effective ways. Tony Stein was 23 when he died. He had been a Marine for 2 years and 5 months. He fought on 2 islands, killed more enemy soldiers than records could count, saved 9 lives in 1 day. He did it all with a weapon he helped build from aircraft parts, refusing to stop until a sniper's bullet ended his war on March 1. The volcanic ash of Iwo Jima claimed his life but could never claim his memory. That belongs to history. Preserved in Medal of Honor citations and fading photographs. In training lectures and museum exhibits. In accounts from Marines who fought alongside him and watched in awe as the barefoot corporal made impossible runs through impossible fire. His story endures because it captures something essentially American. The immigrant's son who found opportunity and repaid it with his life. The dropout who proved intelligence and courage come in many forms. The toolmaker who understood the human mind was the most important weapon. The volunteer who chose the most dangerous path because defending his country mattered more than personal safety. He was proof that heroism isn't measured in inches or pounds, but in actions and choices. On Iwo Jima, where over 800 Americans gave their lives for every square mile of volcanic rock. Where fighting was so intense both sides sustained over 100% casualties in some units. Tony Stein's actions on February 19, 1945 remain exceptional. 8 trips, 9 lives saved. 20 enemy soldiers killed. 1 improvised weapon. 2 destroyed feet. Multiple wounds. 0 hesitation. The barefoot corporal. The man with the stinger. The toolmaker who built a legend from aircraft parts and courage. The Marine who refused to stop fighting until enemy fire made the choice for him. That is the complete story of Corporal Tony Stein, told with all the blood and courage and mechanical genius that made it real. A story of a toolmaker who became a warrior, of an improvised weapon that became legendary, of one day when one man's actions saved lives and changed the course of battle on a black sand beach in the Pacific. Heroes don't seek glory. They see what needs to be done and do it anyway. Tony Stein stood up when everyone else was pinned down. He ran toward danger when instinct screamed for cover. He came back for more when his body begged him to stop. That is the story of the barefoot corporal and the gun from the sky.